Governor Mike Huckabee, and your calls at 855-840-HUCK. That's 855-840-4825.
There are a lot of questions that people have about Islam. It is mysterious to most Americans, even though there are an increasing number of Muslims in the United States. In fact, it is one of the fastest growing religions in the U.S. But there's been a lot of anxiety, in part because of Islamic radicals who become the terrorist, who inflict extraordinary damage upon this world of ours, kill a lot of innocent people. But is that true of all the people who follow Islam? We're going to have a conversation about that during this next section. Joel Richardson has a book called Mideast Beast, the Scriptural Case for an Islamic Antichrist. And he is a Christian minister, and we are joined with him now, Joel Richardson. Joel, thanks for joining us here on the Mike Huckabee Show.
Governor Huckabee, thank you very much for having me on.
You have made the comment that Islam is the single greatest challenge that Christians face. So why do you feel that way?
Well, as a former pastor, Governor, you're well aware of the fact that what we believe about the end of the world or what people believe about the future affects the way they live. And within the world of end-time teaching, prophecy teaching, and so forth, there's a very widely held belief based on a particular interpretation of Ezekiel 38 and 39, that Islam is about to be wiped out supernaturally. This is widely held throughout many mainstream Christian denominations. My opinion is the greatest need for the Islamic world is Christian missionaries. And of course, if we're being taught that Islam is about to be wiped out through some supernatural series of prophetic events, that's a significant deterrent to sending people to the Islamic world. So one of the things that I'm trying to correct in my book is this idea that Islam's going away, because it is not going away anytime soon. It's growing by leaps and bounds. Meanwhile, here in the United States, our kids are leaving the churches, and we're quickly becoming a post-Christian nation.
Joel Richardson, my guest here on the Mike Huckabee Show, author of the book Mideast Beast, Scriptural Case for an Islamic Antichrist. Now, I've met and known and had friendships with a number of people who are Muslim, who are wonderful people, decent folks. They're not radical. They are appalled at the things that are done in the name of Islam. And obviously I am unapologetically a believing Christian, so I don't share the theology. I don't share the cultural setting at all. But I don't think all people in Islam are radicalized. Do you think that Islam, by its nature, is inherently dangerous?
Well, first of all, let me just say I fully agree with you. I have plenty of Muslim friends myself, and I agree that they're not all radicals. Statistics right now say it's between 10 to 15%. Extrapolate 1.59 billion people. You have close to the amount of American citizens that we have that are considered to be radical. That's a significant number, but it's certainly not the majority. Nevertheless, Islam, I do believe, is an inherently evil and soul-destroying, freedom-destroying force in the earth. And again, like yourself, as an unapologetic Christian, I think the approach to take is to stand opposed to Islam as an ideology, while affirming that it's not purely evil. Of course, every religion has elements of truth, and I believe that Satan always candy coats his poison, so to speak. But nevertheless, despite the fact that Islam is evil, every Muslim was created in the image of God, and so we're called to love Muslims. But we have to speak the truth regarding Islam as a religious belief and an ideology. It's not going to save anyone, and again, it's a destructive force in the earth.
To your mind, what do you think is the naivete of Americans when it comes to Islam? Is there something that, in particular, you feel like Americans ought to know about the Islamic religion?
Well, again, Americans are hamstrung to think critically because of our, indoctrination with cultural relativity. The spirit of the age, or I could say idol of our age, is tolerance and religious pluralism. And so we stumble over ourselves to demonstrate how magnanimous and how tolerant we are and so forth. And there's certainly good elements to, of people that we are being tolerant, for sure. But nevertheless, Islam is it's a freedom-destroying force in the earth. It's demonstrable. And so whether we're conservative or liberal, we should be able to agree, that we disagree with Sharia law. We disagree with many of the fundamental principles of Sharia law. And we should all be willing to stand together on behalf of freedom, on behalf of all of the principles that have made America such an exceptional nation.
Define and promote American interest in the Middle East. So, Daniel, I was talking earlier with Joel Richardson, who has some concerns that Islam generally is something that we need to be concerned about, and that we don't know enough about. From your perspective, does the religion itself breed radicals, or do radicals use Islam as a vehicle to get to people and radicalize them?
Thank you, Governor. I'd say the former, that Islam is radicalizing. But my main difference with Mr. Richardson and others who have his general outlook is that I'm a historian. Indeed, I'm a historian of early Islam. And the goal of a historian is to trace change over time. And it is a universal rule that everything that's human changes over time. Judaism has changed over time, Christianity has changed, Islam has changed, to give just three examples. And whereas he looks at Islam as a static, essential force that has no change, I believe it has changed and is changing and will change. Indeed, in my own career, which dates back to the 1960s, there's enormous change in Islam. It's a far more radical force today than it was when I began my study of it. And if it can become more radical, it can become less radical. And therefore, I'm much less prone to seeing it as a single thing, and much more interested in how it's changing and what we can do, what American foreign policy can do, what we as individuals can do to move it in the right direction. It's been going in the wrong direction for decades now. Are there things we can do to help it go in the right direction, to modernize Islam, to bring it into conformity with modern mores? Christianity has done that. The Christianity today is very different from a few hundred years ago. Islam is different. Islam is changing, and our focus should be not on a static influence, but on how it's changing, what we can do to change it in turn.
Daniel Pipes is my guest here on the Mike Huckabee Show, and we were earlier talking with Joel Richardson, but in both cases we're talking about Islam, its impact upon our world, which is significant, and how Americans should be viewing it. Some forms of Islam are very, very restrictive on women's rights, to the point that it is medieval or even more primitive than that. How do you best communicate the difference between the radicalized version of Islam, the more fundamentalist version, and Islam as I have seen it practiced by people I've known, highly professional people, doctors, attorneys, people of all walks of life, who are not the least bit radical and are quite civil in every respect and treat women with respect and don't seem to have any of the aspects externally of a radical form of religion.
The key determinant, I think, is the Islamic law known as Sharia. There's a spectrum with someone like, say, bin Laden at one end and the people you're referring to at another end in terms of their attitude towards the Sharia. Not only does a bin Laden type or the Taliban, let's say, wish to apply the Islamic law in its entirety, but it wishes to apply an extreme and severe form of it, say, women in burqas and completely undercover and covered, as opposed to, say, the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, which is seeking to apply the Sharia, but only wants women to have their head covered, as opposed to the lawyers that you mentioned who don't seek to apply the Sharia in this form at all. It gets to the heart of the question here of what do you keep and what do you discard in religion. This is an active debate in all religions. So, I don't know, take the question of homosexuality in the Episcopalian Church. It is clear in the Bible that it's prohibited, and yet there are new interpretations that say, well, that's out of date. Or slavery. 150 years ago, there were advocates of slavery who said, look, it's in the Bible advocates. Abolition said, no, that is out of date. It's not in keeping. It's a misreading of it, and so forth. These debates that take place in the West are also taking place in Islam. What do you keep and what do you discard? What does it mean to be a Muslim today? How much of the Sharia do you apply? Which aspects of it? And how completely? If you're going to have women engage in some kind of modest wear some kind of modest clothing, how much is that? Does it mean long-sleeve shirts? Does it mean wearing a burqa? These are the debates that are taking place in Islam. And as I said before, it's changing. One sees evolution. I lived in Egypt, for example, 40 years ago, and there was essentially no head coverings to be seen except among peasants. Today, you walk the streets of the most sophisticated parts of Cairo, and you see them everywhere. Well, that's a change.
Well, Daniel Pipes, thank you for joining us. I appreciate both you and Joel Richardson for joining us here today on the Mike Huckabee Show. It's a fascinating conversation, one that we will continue to have because we certainly are confronted every day, not just with the neighborly forms of Islam that we see in our own communities with very respectable, decent people, but we also see the impact to the most radical forms when people strap bombs to the bellies of their children and try to blow up airplanes and our soldiers. Anyway, it's a delight to have both of you here on the Mike Huckabee Show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
One of the things I was certainly going to say that's fair is that I am very concerned about a naivete regarding the radicalization of Islam. And one thing we've got to be clear, radical Islam followers are a real threat to the United States of America and to every single one of us. And by the same reason that I don't want to say all Muslims are dangerous, I don't want to be stupid and say, oh, you don't have to worry. Let's never call these radical terrorists Islamic terrorists. Well, yes, let's do. Because if that's what they are, let's call them that. You know, I've been very blunt. When people like the folks at the Westboro Baptist Church call themselves Christians, I challenge that. They call themselves that. I tell people that they are no more Christian, than I am a follower of Zeus. Because you don't go around saying you want people to die and that you're glad that a soldier was killed and that his family is grieving in the name of Jesus. You just don't do that. There's nothing in the New Testament that suggests that God gets some pleasure in the untimely death of an American soldier. Nothing. And so I'm going to call out people like I do the followers who claim to be followers of Christ, who are anything but. And therefore, I'm going to be very comfortable and not feel the least bit intimidated to calling out those people who are followers of a radical form of Islam who would like to kill me and you, like to kill all of us. And I think we're being just politically correct to the point of being stupid when we are afraid to call it like it is. Love to get your thought on that. 855-840-4825. 855-840-4825. You can also tweet me at @GovMikeHuckabee. Go to my website, MikeHuckabee.com. Sign up for my Facebook page or to follow me on Twitter. That's MikeHuckabee.com. Or call us, 855-840-4825. Your calls when we return. This is the Mike Huckabee Show.